comparers, you can start.
Very good morning to one and all present here. Before we begin, let me give you an overview of today's session. We will begin with the welcome address, followed by a brief introduction about our guest speaker. After this, we will listen to our eminent speaker, followed by the Q&A segment, where the speaker will answer queries posed by the moderator. We shall conclude the session with the vote of thanks.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Avenir 2021, a global virtual career guidance program launched by Indian School Al-Wadi Al-Kabir under the aegis of the Board of Directors of Indian Schools in Oman. On behalf of Indian School Al-Wadi Al-Kabir, I, Archid of Class 8 from ISWK, take the proud privilege of expressing a profound gratitude to His Majesty Haytham bin Tariq Al Said for his noble benevolence. May the Almighty shower His choicest blessings on His Majesty, and may this nation experience peace and everlasting prosperity.
We see programs like Avenir 2021 playing a critical role in the fulfillment of this vision by guiding and shaping the future of the youth.
It gives me immense pleasure to welcome the Chairman, Board of Directors, Indian Schools in Oman, Dr. Sivakumar Manikam. We wholeheartedly welcome dignitaries from the Ministry of Education and officials from the Indian Embassy. A cordial and courteous welcome to all the members of the Board of Directors of Indian Schools in Oman. A hearty welcome to Mr. Alkesh Joshi, the President of ISWK Management Committee, and other members of the School Management Committee of Indian School Al-Wadi Al-Kabir. A very warm welcome to principals, vice principals, and the entire teaching fraternity across the globe. I am extremely delighted to welcome students and parents from all over the world. Thank you one and all for your gracious presence here this morning.
It is with sheer joy and great pride that I take the task of introducing our guest speaker today. And I feel elated for the august audience for sparing your time out of your busy schedule to invest in your dreams. With great honor, I now introduce you to Mr. Dimitri Perrin, who is an IS officer in the School of Computer Science, Queensland University of Technology. Dr. Dimitri Perrin is Chief Investigator in the QUT Center of Data Science, co-leading the Health and Biological Systems domain. Prior to joining QUT, he worked with Dublin City University, Ireland, Riken, and Osaka University in Japan. I also welcome his associate, Ms.Marina Mckeague, Place Manager, Engineering, Science, and Health, to this platform. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Dimitri Perrin and Ms.Marina Mckeague to enlighten us on career talks on data analytics. The platform is all yours, sir and ma'am.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and welcome to everyone joining us online today. It's a great pleasure to talk to all of you and try to get you excited about data science. And so what I would like to do in the next few minutes is to try to give you 6,120 reasons why you need to be excited about data science. And so you might be wondering, why 6,120 minutes? No, why 6,120 reasons? And you'll see if you stick around until the end of the presentation. But first, let me introduce myself briefly. As was mentioned, my name is Dimitri Perrin. I'm an associate professor in the School of Computer Science at QUT in Australia. And I'm also in QUT a chief investigator in the Center for Data Science. So originally my background is in computer science and applied mathematics. And for the last 15 years or so, I've been working on applying computer-based and data science methods to social and biological systems. And what I want to show you today is how broad the opportunities are for people who have skills in data science, data analytics, and how it can transform entire domains in modern societies. And so to get us started, I want to talk about a random day as it might have gone to pass 10, 20, 30 years ago, maybe 50 years ago. Imagine you or your parents, someone in your family is taking a car and driving to the city. You drive your normal route, you take the same route every day. You stop at a shopping center, and in that shopping center, you get some groceries, and you're going to pay cash for these groceries. You finished your shopping, so you decide to go home. On the way back, you start to feel poorly. You don't know exactly what's going on, but you don't feel your usual self. But you don't pay too much attention. You ignore it. You let it run. But after a few days, things don't improve. You still feel quite poor, and so you decide to go to the hospital. You arrive at the hospital. The first thing they do is interview you. They try to understand what's wrong. They also need to understand your entire medical history. So it's a fairly long process. They decide to run some tests, and they conclude, based on your medical history and the tests that they've run, that you have some bacterial infection. They don't know exactly which one, so they decide to start you on an antibiotic course, while in parallel, they try to grow the bacteria that they took from a sample to try to identify the specific strain that's responsible for your infection. A few days later, you still feel quite bad. You're still at hospital. You've been there for a few days. And finally, they identify that this strain from the samples that they've collected is actually resistant to the antibiotics that they were originally prescribing you. And so they decide to change your prescription. And finally, at that point, you start to feel better. Okay, and so that scenario would have played roughly unchanged in the 50s, 60s, maybe up to a few years ago. Let's look at how today, in today's data-intensive world, that same scenario would play very, very differently. So you still want to take your car, you're going to go to the city, but now instead of just always driving the exact same route every day, because it's the only one you know, you're following what your phone recommends. Your phone is going to recommend you the shortest path based on some real-time data that is contributed by other users. And so you're benefiting from that data, but the government is also monitoring mobility at the level of the entire population and is using that to plan future infrastructure. So the data is helping you, it's also helping the government. You stop at the shopping center, you do your groceries, but instead of just shopping for what you had on your shopping list, you also decide to take some additional items because you received some specific vouchers. You have a rewards card for that shopping center that you use every time you go there. And so they've tracked your shopping history and they were able to recommend additional purchases for you and to incentivize you to purchase these items. They gave you some vouchers. So it changed a bit how you behaved at the shop. You'd have to pay, of course, but instead of paying cash, you're paying using your phone because you have your credit card stored on your phone. And now your phone is going to store your entire payment history as well. On the way back, your smartwatch that you're wearing is detecting that you have an elevated heart rate and sends you a warning that something is wrong and you should go to the hospital immediately. And so instead of waiting days, feeling poorly and not really knowing what's going on, you decide to act immediately and you go to the hospital. There at the hospital, they don't interview you to understand your medical history because they already have that on file. Based on their electronic health record system, they have you enter your history, they also have data from other patients. And so immediately they suspect, they have some idea of what might be going on. They still interview you, try to understand symptoms, but their thinking is already primed by what they know about you and what they know about other patients. They take a sample, but instead of waiting days, minutes after taking that sample, their sequencing machine starts to spitting out some sequencing information, which is immediately analyzed. And within minutes, they identify a specific bacterial species. An hour later, they already know which antibiotics that infection is resistant to. So straight away, they can give you the appropriate prescription and you immediately start to feel better. And so through this example, you can see how many different aspects of our daily lives are completely transformed by how much data we're producing, how much data we have access to, and the type of information we can leverage from all this amount of data. And data really is everywhere. Societies and economies across the world are becoming more and more digitized. And so there are many things that used to be on paper or used not to be monitored at all, that is being captured digitally in the modern world. And the amount of data that exists and is being produced is increasing very rapidly. It's doubling it roughly every 2 years, and that's fundamentally changing many aspects of the way we live. And there's an interesting piece of a Forbes report from a few years back that was saying that if you look at all the data that's ever been produced in the entire history of mankind, 90% of it is less than 2 years old, right? So it really shows you the way we're producing more and more data. It's really an explosion. And so how we make sense of that data and how we use it is potentially very important and can have a very big impact. And so if you think about who's producing the data, who's storing the data, where the data is used, it really is everywhere. So of course, the first thing that come to mind are search engine like Google or Bing, social media platforms like Facebook. You can also think about all the online systems like streaming services like Netflix. They store all of your viewing information, and based on what you like and didn't like, they can recommend, they can match your profile to other profiles on their system, and they can make recommendations based on what you're most likely to like, because it is in their interest to stream to you things you're going to like so that you stay on their platform. Same thing for online shops like Amazon. They can also make specific recommendations that are tailored to your own preferences. Of course, all the new world of digital assistants, Siri, Echo, Alexa, and so on, that relies on having access to a lot of data, all the natural language processing and artificial intelligence that drives this assistant is really important. We mentioned mobility already in terms of traffic information. Another aspect that's transformed by data in the mobility space is, of course, self-driving vehicles. That's we're not quite there yet, but there's some trials already underway, and all the machine learning behind it is also driven by a lot of data. And so how we process, analyze, and make sense of that data and use it to for these self-driving cars to leverage all the machine learning technologies we have to be able to drive themselves is a big change of the next few years. With the explosion of wearable devices and smartwatches and so on, we're also producing a lot of data about ourselves, right? If you think about all projects like Fitbit, Apple Watch, and so on, think about all the information they're tracking about you. They know when you're sleeping or when you're awake. They know how active you are. They know where you're going, how much exercise you're taking, and so on. It's generating very rich information about you that can help you as an individual, but can also, when you aggregate across entire populations, help you understand interesting dynamics at the population level as well, which can inform public health initiatives, for instance. Data is also transforming medicine. Medicine is becoming very, very data intensive, from things like electronic health records, artificial intelligence and machine learning applied to things like medical imaging to automatically detect brain tumors or breast cancer and so on. Of course, genetics as well is a big revolution. It's becoming a lot easier, a lot faster, and a lot cheaper to sequence genomes, right? And of course, that genome is going to be, if you think of a genome, it's billions of characters of genetic information. And so analyzing, making sense of that data is again going to be driven by data science methodologies. Environmental research, again, is something that relies a lot on data. Could be sensors distributed throughout cities to measure pollution levels. Could be tracking animals with GPS chips or RFIDs to understand movements of different populations of wild animals to drive conservation efforts and so on. And of course, in public security and safety, there's a lot of work around tracking and recognition as well. And so you can see across many different aspects of our daily life and the way societies are organized, there's more and more that data aspect that's driving how decisions are made. And so being able to work with complex, large data sets and make sense of them is more and more becoming a very important field for future employment. And the key idea is that data can be transformative, can really completely transform the way entire aspects of our lives are lived. But the flip side is that if you don't know how to analyze data properly, if you don't know how to understand the limitations of the analysis that you're doing, it can also be very misleading. There's that temptation when you see numbers to think that if someone gives you a number, it has more weight than if they just give you a qualitative description, right? If I tell you, oh, it's pretty hot outside, no, it's pretty hot today, you're thinking, oh yeah, okay, you're feeling like it's hot. If I tell you, oh, I checked and it's 36.7 degrees today, well, suddenly you feel like I know what I'm talking about because I give you a number. And so that number makes it sound like, it's more precise. But there can be errors in measurements, right? Maybe my thermometer is giving me a wrong value, or maybe I'm telling you that it's 36.7 and I'm telling you, oh, it's much hotter than it was the other days. But what if my analysis was wrong and I'm telling you that there's a big change when in fact the change is not significant, right? So just because I'm using a number doesn't mean that it's necessarily more accurate. And so if not done properly, the data analysis can also be misleading. And so being able to understand how to do proper analysis, how to understand the limitations of the analysis is very important. And that means that there's a growing need for experts in data science, right? We need more data scientists, we need more data analysts to be able to work with that data, make sense of it, and convey the results of the analysis in a way that won't be misleading for others. So we have needs for these experts, but even more broadly, we also need all graduates, all future workers throughout society to be what we call data literate, right? We need everyone to have at least a basic understanding of what it means to analyze some data, because that way you have experts who are doing meaningful analysis, and you have the general population who is able to understand the limitations of these analyses and won't have over optimistic or pessimistic interpretations of these results. And more and more our future is going to be data intensive, so it's in everyone's interest to become more familiar with working with data and working with the results of data analysis. And so sometimes you might have heard that before. People are saying, oh, data is the new oil. And I've shown you a few examples of people who've said that. So this Clive Humby with someone working at Tesco, was one of the person responsible for developing their own rewards card, was saying that data is the new oil. It's valuable like oil, but if it's not refined, it cannot really be used. The same way that oil itself is not really useful, it's by refining it that you have to, you get products like gas, plastic, chemicals, and so on. That's the valuable part. And the same way, data needs to be broken down and analyzed to have some value. He's not the only one thinking that. Same thing that's the European Commission reports saying that personal data is the new oil of the internet and the new currency of the digital world. Information is the oil of the 21st century, and analytics is the combustion engine. Many examples from IBM, Under Armour, data is the new oil, and companies that will win are using math. Microsoft Research, data is the new oil. So you have these phrases that it's becoming more and more present. I would argue that data is actually not the new oil, because we have a number of key differences. The first one being that when you have oil, of course, if we're going to be strict about it, you could argue that it's different quality and so on, but more or less, different barrels would be interchangeable. It's not true for data. Not all data is alike. You can, interchange pieces of data. Also, oil is a limited resource, right? We have to be careful about how we use oil because we can run out of oil. We will never run out of data. If anything, there's too much data. We're producing more and more data faster and faster. We're not going to run out, right? And so also in many industries, it's seen as being desirable that we replace oil as an energy source. But these same industries are not trying to get rid of data. They're trying to increase how they're using the data because they recognize that the more they use the data, the more valuable it gets. And so the demand for data-driven processes and the need for data scientists is not going to disappear. If anything, it's only going to increase more and more. And that's reflected if you look at employment projections for data scientists and data analysts. So I have a few figures here just to give you an idea. So it's in an Australian context, it's Australian numbers, but that would be true in many countries across the world. And you see that there is an increase in demand for data science skills. In Australia, it's predicted that the demand for data science professional is going to grow twice as fast as the demand for the overall workforce. And as I said, that's numbers for Australia, but it's going to be true across the world. Across the world, we're producing, it's not an Australian specific thing. We're producing more and more data everywhere. And so there's a need for data scientists and data analysts everywhere as well. So same thing, different way to look at it. You look at employment websites such as Seek, same thing, there's very strong job growth that's being predicted, but 27% over 5 years. And what's interesting as well is to note that when you work in data science, in data analysis, you're not confined to a unique domain. It's not that there's a single facet of society that is becoming more in data intensive. As I showed before, we're producing more data on mobility. We're producing more data in health. We're producing more data for education, and we're producing more data in terms of the way government is running, right? So that data science skill can be applied in many different domains. And so you could work around intelligence and policy, or ICT, business and systems, management analysts, and so on. But the key thing is across all of these domains, what you need is your data science skills. And you see how the majority of jobs are going to be educated jobs, right? So typically bachelor, master level or above. And you can see how across all of these different application domains, that's true. It's highly qualified jobs, a lot more than in the overall workforce. And so you can think of, I said that there's that explosion in data. One way to think about it is really seeing like data is a rising tide, right? We have more and more data that's being produced, and so when there's a big wave like this, right? Remembering that I'm talking from Australia today, you have two options. One is to learn how to surf that big wave. The other one is to let it drown you. And so what I'm really trying to convince you of today is that there's that wave coming, whether you want it or not. There is a big wave of data coming. And so we can help you learn how to surf that big wave of data. And so to give you an example of how you become highly qualified in data science and data analysis, I'm just showing some courses that we're offering here at QUT that give you these skills. So we have programs at the bachelor and master level. So for instance, at the bachelor level, we have a brand new Bachelor of Data Science, which you can take in isolation or combine with other degrees like Bachelor of Business or Bachelor of Laws. We also have a Bachelor of Information Technology, where you can do data science as a second major. At the master level, we have Master of Data Analytics. We also have Master of IT that has a data science major. And we also have a Master of Digital Communication. And, the interesting thing is, seeing double degrees is really highlighting how data science is about, computer science and mathematical tools, but it's also about how you apply these tools in a specific domain, right? That's where you get the value. The impact that you have is by generating insights for that domain. And so it's highlighted here, by that idea of doing double degree with business and data science, or data science and law, or as a vertical double. So, bachelor followed by master. Here we have a new one as well, which is the Bachelor of Biomedical Science and the Master of Data Analytics, which focuses more on how you can use data science and applied machine learning and these kind of methods in a health context. And so I'm getting close to the end, but you might be wondering, well, at the very beginning, you told me that I would give 6,120 reasons why you need to do data science. And I've given a few, but probably not 6,000. And so you might be wondering why that number. And it's because on average, each of us is producing 1.7 megabyte of data every second of every day. And my presentation is, slightly under 30 minutes. And so 30 times 1.7 megabytes is roughly 6,120 megabytes of data. So while you were listening to me, on average across the world, every single person produced 6,120 megabytes of data. And so we can help you analyze, learn methods and tools and methods that will help you make sense of all that data. As I said, it's a big wave coming, and we all need to know how to surf that wave. And so before I wrap up, I want to flag that, we have that Q&A session coming up. But if you have more questions after that, there's a link there to talk with, to schedule a one-on-one counseling session, and that can, help you find your right place in that data science and data analytic education space. And with that, I want to thank you all again for coming today and for listening to my short presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to help provide some answers.
That was an inspiring session by Mr. Dimitri Perrin and Ms.Marina Mckeague. Now, we would like to request our most honored speakers to kindly answer a few questions raised by the audience. May I request the teacher moderator to put forth the questions posed by the audience.
Greetings to you, Mr. Perrin and Ms. Marina. The information you gave me right now, for me, data was just some statistics and analysis that was there, but how much actually data is everywhere, if you see. Even on our iPhones, when we are doing online shopping, it's just like, oh, wow, I want this, but they're actually tracking what we really want. So people don't really know how much information is there in data. So I would just put forth few questions. What got you interested in data analysis? Like, how did you get interested in this field?
Well, to some extent, it was by chance. So the degree I was studying was, it was back when I was in France. I was doing a master of engineering, studying computer science, and we had different majors we could choose from. And the one that really appealed to me was scientific computing. At the time, I was really interested in trying to understand how people developed computer-based models to predict the weather. I was, a big weather geek. I still am to some extent. And so I was fascinated by how people were using computers to try to predict the weather tomorrow, next week, up to 10 days from now, and be quite accurate at it. And so I was trying to, try to understand how people were doing that. And so I decided to go into that major. That was, where that was one of the things being discussed. And of course, if you start working with modeling, you need some data to train these models. And so very quickly, if you're trying to do scientific computing and modeling, you need data. You need to be able to make sense of the data. And so more and more, what I was doing in that space became more data intensive. And so I was, that wave of data that I'm describing, it's something that's accelerating, but it's something that was already starting back then. And so I was sort of, immersed into that space early on. And yeah, it's something I really enjoy working with data. And as you said, and as I explained before, data is really everywhere. And so I really like the idea of learning some methods, some tools that can be applied to many different domains, because that way I never feel like I'm getting tired of what I'm doing, because I can always apply it to something new.
What I understand, to join this field, you need a lot of interest in it. You can't just be anyone who will get into data analysis, right? So what suggestion would you like to give the students regarding joining this field? It's I think, huge field.
I don't think there's necessarily, one single profile that would, correspond to everyone who's working in that space. It's, there's many different ways of working with data. Some of them are going to be more on the computer science side, right? Maybe if you're working with very large data sets, there are challenges in terms of how you cope with that amount of data, how you store it safely, how you manage, access rights to different parts of the data sets, and so on. So it could be very much, computer focused. But of course, there's also a statistical side. And so it's a very broad spectrum. And so some people would really be in the middle and do both. Some of them would be more computational or more mathematical. But yeah, it's mostly people who are interested in STEM areas, right? So if you're interested in science, in programming, in mathematics, you would typically really enjoy working with data. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily the only profile that would fit. There are also many people who came from a specific domain, and in that domain saw the explosion of data. And so they're coming to data science from their domain expertise and trying to pick up the math and the computer science. The way I ended up in that field was more the other way around. I started with the computer science and the math, and then I saw in specific fields how it was applied, but some people arrived to it the other way.
Okay, what courses can the students be approaching if they have to take data analysis?
You mean at the university level, or
yes, at the university level?
So, I mean, as I explained on my slide, there are some, more and more degrees that are specific to data science. So, for instance, we have our Bachelor of Data Science, which will really, be exactly in that field, right? That's the whole point, is to, train you to become a data science expert. It doesn't mean it's the only option. As I said, data science is very broad, and so there's different ways to look at it. You could do a Bachelor of IT and do data science as the second major, right? So if you do that, you're more of an IT specialist who has, as a second specialty, you're working with large and complex data sets. Or similarly, you could do a Bachelor of Math and train as a statistician, but then pick data science as your second major and be exposed to some of the computational challenges of working with the data. So you have many different options. But yeah, if we, at the high level, yeah, either Bachelor of Data Science or IT or math with a data science option in there.
Yes, I'm sure most of the students will opt for the online one-on-one session that you all provide at QUT. It was a great session listening to you, Dr. Perrin. And Ms.Marina, thank you so much for sharing your information with us.
No problem. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir and ma'am, for all the valuable answers given to the audience by attending to their concerns so patiently during the course of the discussion.
As we draw to the end of this enriching session, I deem it my great privilege to propose the vote of thanks. Let me first express my profound gratitude to His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq for the magnanimous benevolence showered on the Indian diaspora in the Sultanate of Oman. May the Almighty shower abundant blessings on His Majesty and this beautiful country of our residence. We extend heartfelt thanks to our eminent speakers, Mr. Dimitri Perrin and Ms.Marina Mckeague, for the motivating session. Thank you, sir and ma'am. Our deepest sense of appreciation and gratitude to Dr. Shivakumar Manikam, Chairman, Board of Directors, Indian Schools in the Sultanate of Oman, and other honorary directors on the Board of Directors, Indian Schools in Oman. Our heartfelt thanks to Mr. Alkesh Joshi, the President, Indian School Wadi Kabir Management Committee, other members of the Management Committee, and Mr. D.N. Rao, Principal of ISWK, principals, vice principals, and teachers of all the Indian schools for their profound encouragement at all times.
Our sincere gratitude goes to our platinum sponsor, Studyco, gold sponsor, Jain Group of Institutions, Grey Matter Academics, Vellore Institute of Technology, Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Education, bronze sponsors, Middle East College, Oman, Thappar Institute of Engineering and Technology, Dallas Baptist University, MIT World Peace University, Pune. Media sponsor, the Arabian Stories, digital marketing partner, Spectrum, for their support in making this mega event a tangible reality. I wish to thank each and every student and parent for their valuable presence in making this session a grand success. An event of this kind requires the coordination of a committed team. Thank you to the ISWK team for making Avenir 2021 possible. Thank you all. See you soon for the next session. Please check the Avenir website, avenioman.com, for details of further sessions. Take care and have a good day. Thank you.